Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 387 of the Running Rogue podcast. This is your host, Chris McClung, joined by co host James Dodds. Excited to be back with you with another episode. And we're finally moving on to chapter 3 of the book after camping out at chapter 2 for 4 episodes. So we got our money's worth out of that one. And now we get to dig into some of the details behind the philosophy. I know we've already done that at some level. Today, we're going to be talking about miles matter, why volume is so important to your running journey. But first, James, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's a good day. It's a good week. Great races this weekend here locally. So I'm happy in a lot of regards. How about you?
I'm good. I mean, I got to experience part of the Austin International Half, formerly known as the 3M Half Marathon here in Austin. And it was a perfect day for racing. We had a bunch of runners out there from Rogue, including some who flew in, which was pretty awesome. And it was just a perfect day. And I got to pace one of my runners to a PR and test a little bit of my fitness on my current journey. So it was just a blast. I still am getting used to calling it the Austin International Half, especially the Spurs Austin International Half. Shout out San Antonio Spurs, I guess, for wanting to sponsor the race. But anyway, getting used to that part. But it was the same amazing net downhill course, point to point, perfect weather as it usually is. And it was a day for fast times. And the energy is always good out there. We always have good support on the course as well. So had a blast doing that.
Yeah. What is it when they say like when luck is like when preparation meets opportunity or whatever? I feel like that's the story from this weekend. It was definitely a day for the taking, and those that were ready, they took it. Like I had a guy who 2 weeks ago asked me if 8-minute pace was right for his workout. He's like, "Are you sure I've got that right now?" And he's raced faster, but he was like, "You sure I got that right now for a half?" And I was like, "Absolutely." He averaged like 7:43s on the day. Had another woman wanting to break 40 and she ran 1:38. Another guy that wanted to run 90. He hit 90 right on the nose. So I think he was slightly like he wanted that 129. But yeah, it was just like great results in every direction because they were ready for that moment. And I feel like the same happened with one of your athletes. And I don't know if you want to save this, but I think you should tell your story of pacing because it fits today's topic, but we can tuck it in later.
I mean, we should talk about it now because it's the perfect introduction.
I spilled the beans.
I mean, it's the perfect introduction. For those that don't know, I have been taking a break from speed workouts, performing at the highest level over the last 18 months or so, really since Houston 2024, when I had the day that I didn't want that day after getting sick. And so I've been, for a lot of reasons, just at a different pace in terms of my running, and spent really most of 2024 and half of 2025 really just kind of in maintenance mode, doing stuff, but not really focused on performance. And then I signed up for a race, which I don't know if I've talked about here on here recently, but I'm doing the stage race in March called Run the Rocks. It's in Moab. It's a 3-day trail stage race where you do 55 miles over 3 days. The middle day being the longest, it's about 26 miles, and the other 2 days are kind of 13 to 15. As you compete over 3 days, you stay at a central hotel, and you go to different trails each day. So excited about that. Been wanting to test out the trail space for a while, and also just try something new. And in getting ready for that, I basically just recommitted to the volume side of my running journey. Haven't been doing speed workouts, just getting miles in. And I had a really good 10 or 12 weeks kind of building up before 3M. I've got another 6-7 weeks left to the race. And so my plan has just been easy running, basically, with strides. Nothing more, no speed workouts, just get the volume in. And I was able to build up to, I think, 9 of the last 10 weeks prior to a little down week before the race. I'd done over 60 miles a week with upper 60s kind of the last couple of weeks before that. So really just putting in volume, but feeling good about it, going super easy in order to do so that my body could adapt. And I have this woman I coach in San Francisco Shout out Laura Fenton, who I started working with her in September. She's worked with us before in our virtual groups, the Renegades, as well as Kathy's Team Rogue virtual group, but had needed a more one-on-one touch because she's in a not post-grad, but a graduate rotational program in her realm, and was going to need a little bit more specificity and manipulation around her new schedule as her rotations changed and stuff like that. So she started working with me a one-on-one. And we set pretty early on the goal for her to break 90 at a race around this time. Well, it turns out she knows someone who had a free bib to Spurs International, Austin International half. And she had also one for me. She's like, hey, if I get you a free bib, will you jump in and help me out, pace me a little bit? And I just said, look, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do at that point. I'm not going to train to specifically pace, but I'm going to, put in the work I'm already doing for this other race. And so that was what I've been doing. Just easy volume. Again, kind of 60 to 70 mile weeks over the last several months. Going into this race, didn't really know what was going to happen. I haven't run a continuous mile at the paces she was going to run in probably 18 months. Just been doing easy volume and strides. And so show up on race day. I said, look, I'll get you through 5K because A, I wanted to give myself an out, and B, I wanted her to be prepared to go on her own if she needed to. And so we jump in, we start. I know the course well. I know this race. I knew I could at least get her going and get her started on the right foot. But in the week leading up, I started to get a little bit confident. I'm like, I'm starting to feel good. Fitness is coming around. I jumped in with some people for segments in Houston and run in the 6-minute range and felt comfortable doing that. I'm like, man, maybe I can go further than I thought. And so, I jump in and we're going and we get started. It was a little crazy at the start of this one, just with all the chaos, but we found our rhythm. We're executing the plan perfectly for what she wanted to do. And I remember around 3 or 4, the body just like, what are we doing here? Like it felt okay, but it didn't feel smooth because it had just been a while since I'd been hammering 640 X pace. So anyway, I just do what I do. I relaxed into it, focused on being smooth, finding that groove, finding that rhythm. And, I have a history at those paces, so it was at least familiar to me. And we just kept going, and I just kept clicking off mile after mile. And honestly, I felt better as I went. And again, I know the course well. I mean, it's just a really favorable course in general, net downhill, but not extreme. It's about, I think, 300 feet net downhill, but you get a little help from the terrain, and I knew it, and I knew what was coming next. And as with this race, basically the delineator between, your cruise kind of half marathon pace and your close is this hill that happens at mile 9.5 or so, where you take a left turn, you go up this climb, and then once you get on the other side of that, you got some of the more favorable downhills on the course. And the idea for me is once you get there, you can go and kind of use gravity to your advantage. And so I just kept thinking about that, like at least get her to that point, get her to the downhill, and then she can close it out. But again, as I got there, I just felt better and better. And so and she was so smooth, just clicking off the miles, clearly not bothered by the pace, in the right, you could tell she was in the right space from her perspective. And then, we got over the climb at 9.5, and I said, all right, let's go. It's time to lean into these downhills and really start to pick it up. And we did, and we progressed every single mile in from there and went chasing. She had some women up ahead of her, and I was like, all right, let's go get them. And we did. And every mile was faster. And by the end, we picked up Raymond Suarez from Rogue Cedar Park. Shout out to them and his coach, Donnie. And he was rolling with us at the end. And the last mile was the fastest mile. And honestly, at that point, I just felt great. I'm like, all right, let's do this. And we closed it out, and she ended up with a massive PR to our 127 and change, and much faster than we had originally been chasing. And it was just a good day, and I felt really good doing it and surprised myself a little bit, but I also knew that, it might be in there because of the work I'd been putting in just from a pure volume perspective. And it was. So it was cool to see, awesome to be able to witness her result firsthand and help, help out where I could from that perspective. So it was just a good day.
Yeah. That's like a quadruple, if not, what's the 5? Quintuple win. It's like the personal win of like getting to roll like that and see where your fitness is. I know the feeling of when your athlete performs. That's the greatest of the win of the day. So and you getting to see it right there. In last week's recording, we said do it for yourself, do it for others, and I didn't know the part about you guys picking up Donnie and Raymond from Cedar Park. So you're getting the community component. You gave us some content for today to drive home. Like, hey, this literally works. Like the miles matter. And she is a living example. Like another shout out to her. I know from day one in the group training, even she just embraced the easy mileage. She was like, okay, I don't have a reason to distrust my coach, so I'm going to lean into it. So her getting the PR, and I guess I wanted to emphasize that because some might be like, well, Chris, like you said, had those paces in him formerly. And so, 9-10 weeks of 60-mile weeks. Okay, cool. He's just back to his top fitness. But it's like, think about that. That's how you get back to that. You establish those easy miles first. But her just living it out as an example and then getting that win, I'm like, so happy for her. So happy for you. It's a display of the stuff we've been talking about. I'm like, that's a win in every direction.
Yeah, I mean, we average, I think, 6:36 or so per mile. She regularly does her long runs 9+ minute miles, and is a higher volume runner for sure because she's worked in our system for a while. But in order to enable that, she polarizes her paces appropriately, and it is a perfect embodiment of it. I also think the other part about it that is just cool is, when we started working together in September one-on-one, she was kind of coming back from a move and time off and all these other things and was building back into it. And so never in 5 months did we have to go to the well in order to make what ended up being a really big step forward. It was about the fundamentals, fundamental volume, polarizing your paces. Initial workouts were not at the paces we were aspiring to. Even at the end, she wasn't hitting half marathon pace in the 6:30s, but was rather doing the appropriate efforts to get the right stimulus on the day, each day. And then boom, this happens. So it sort of just shows you that you don't have to be always reaching in order to have a big result. In fact, most of the time you should be very much in control of what you're doing, because that means you're actually getting the stimulus you need so that a big day like that can happen. And as it relates to me, I've run my fastest half as a 1:15. So to run 1:27, it's not fast, quote, for me. It's fast for me right now, especially given that I haven't been training for that specifically. But you can't divorce, what I've done before with this result. So it's not as clean as saying, well, miles are the only thing that matter. And we'll talk about it in this episode. They aren't the only thing that matter, but they are maybe the most important thing. And so for me to be able to kind of touch some of those former paces without any of that pure intensity or quality work is a testament of that. It's also, as you said, a testament of, well, how do you get back to where you want to be? You don't have to overreach. You just have to lay that foundation, and then will start to come back. And so anyway, it was an awesome day, exciting example of what we're going to talk about. And for me, just a fun way to race. I don't have a desire at the moment to do a half for my personal performance, because again, a lot of reasons for that, but just that's not the season of life I'm in. But to be able to do it, helping someone else, to experience the community, because the other part of the race is, so many people cheering, yelling my name, supporting. It was just fun to be a part of it. And obviously the pride that, as a coach, of seeing your athlete do what they want. Plus a lot of athletes, got to shout out a whole bunch of other athletes that were there from my morning show group. Basically everybody who wanted a PR got a PR on the day. It was just one of those kinds of days. So it was cool to see that and be a part of it. And it's just a reminder that it is about so much more than yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And that was the fifth win when I was trying to rattle them all off in real time. You got your pacer win again. You're known as a pacer. So you got the pacer win
That
again.
I'm good at. I could dial in like nobody's business. But maybe I should charge for those services formally.
Or maybe when you're going for your next PR, volunteer to pace one of your athletes at that PR pace.
And then it'll
And
just,
in the name of service, you'll end up getting more out of
it'll
yourself.
just come.
Yeah.
But anyway, enough about me. But it was a cool weekend, and so yeah, congrats to everybody who crushed it. We're in that, at least in Austin, in this area, the winter is the season to race because we have hot summers and springs and falls. So this is the time when we get to shine. Houston last weekend, Austin International Half, and then of course we've got the Austin Full and Half coming up in February, and so it's fun to be a part of all of that. But anyway, segueing us back to our topic for the day, we're going to talk about miles matter, why do miles matter, and then get to some of the tactics on how you actually implement that idea. We've already talked about this as a principle, and hopefully we've gotten you at least thinking, well, maybe they're onto something here with building volume. And as a reminder, this isn't about trying to reach some arbitrary standard of miles per week. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is taking your starting point and then trying to expand on that. See how you do with the additional volume, and then expand on that further. And at some point, all of us are going to reach a practical limit because yes, miles matter, but only as much as you can recover from those miles, which we've talked about. So there's going to be a limit for all of you, but most people can do more than they think. So let's just remind people really quickly, why are miles so important to becoming a better runner?
First few things that come to mind are that, well, obviously it develops the aerobic engine, but that has its own separate bullet. So I'll kind of save that one and try to emphasize that. I think I said this, or you brought it up on one of our earlier recordings, but just we are stacked systems. There are so many different systems that we're developing. So first and foremost, the miles are kind of like our chance to practice. It's where we develop efficiency. And so, yes, one of the number one things we're doing is developing our aerobic engine, but there's also like reasons why people can't do it. One, they don't have the habit. This is your opportunity to build the habit, like get out the door, like start establishing that routine. We are adaptive creatures. Like our body will, like if we swing a golf club regularly, we become the golfer. If we jump on the skateboard, like the example you gave, we eventually figure out the trick. Like we are made to adapt and figure out our environments and become more efficient. And all we have to do is practice that one thing. So it's in that spirit that I say the miles are, quote, our practice. It's where we develop our efficiencies and where we develop multiple systems. Again, whether it's like the density of our bones or it's the neurological system. So like all those nerves and nerve endings and that signal from the brain down to other areas of the body. It's the muscle tissue itself, learning to not only get stronger, but develop endurance, getting used to contracting at a specific rhythm over time. It's just a multitude of things, such that I almost am like, I don't know which one to pull down on first. It's like, this is how we, quote, become the runner. It's by practicing and establishing the rhythm of doing it.
Yeah, and you become more efficient by doing it. You also become stronger. And when we say strength as an aerobic concept, we're really talking about not necessarily muscular strength, but aerobic strength, which is another word for that is endurance or sort of staying power. And so it's a lot of things. And we've talked about it before, but it kind of comes down to that idea of practice makes perfect. Well, if you're gonna practice anything, you got to put in your time, you got to put in your hours. And with running, it's no different. You got to put in your time, you got to put in your hours, do the work, as we've said before. And so you're developing all those things. And I like that you bring up the musculoskeletal components because you're building that musculoskeletal resilience. If you do it more, you're also building the neuromuscular communication so that the body can efficiently signal to itself, hey, move this muscle then, so that we can actually get it to move faster over time and do it in a coordinated way so that all the muscle groups are working together. And then, of course, there's the most important, I would say, the aerobic part of the system, which is the 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 part of where your body takes oxygen from the working air and then through a lot of events, through a chain of events, gets it to your working muscles and to your mitochondria so that you can perform respiration, which actually makes you go. So that probably being, if we had to point to one, the most important thing, because if you have a small aerobic system, then you're not going to get very far very fast.
Yeah.
And we want to build a big aerobic system. Now, spoiler alert, as we've talked about before, it takes weeks, months, years, decades to fully maximize the aerobic system at consistent volumes. And it takes building your volume over those weeks, months, years, decades in order to really maximize the aerobic system. And while all of us want to get that next goal right away, we know that it's a long-term game. So when we're talking about the aerobic system and all the changes that come with that, remind people what that means.
Well, first, aerobic or aerobic is with oxygen, meaning, and so to counter that, it's anaerobic is without oxygen. So it's remaining in a state that your body's not becoming so acidic or your muscles aren't becoming so fatigued that you can't. And I like using that word efficient, honestly, more than fast, because I know that runners want to get fast because our ultimate marker on race day, like we were celebrating a PR for one of your athletes. And so I never want to take away from that. I know the time on the clock is so valuable, but really what's happening when you're getting faster is you're becoming more efficient in multiple ways. And we can cover this when we talk about efficiency in our ability to process lactate and convert it. But I think I kind of want to hit on it just a little bit right now because there's like an order. It's like, the aerobic zone is when you're just like oxygen is plentiful. So you said taking it out of the air into the lungs, that heart beats and it delivers it all the way down through the working muscles. And then we're able to, down in the cellular level, not only create more mitochondria, but bigger mitochondria. That creates ATP, that's fuel. And so we're looking at it through the lens. Once you get your mind around the science, it's like, okay, yeah, I need to be efficient at being able to create ATP. And how do I do that? It's going to require oxygen. And so I know we'll cover pacing and the rate at which we move later on, but that's why we push this whole aerobic idea. Your aerobic engine is basically, it's your heart and your lungs. It's your ability to take oxygen out of the air, get it to the muscles that you need so that you are quite efficient at the task that you are doing. And since we do one thing, the miles start to matter because we need to develop the ability to get oxygen down to our legs, to our ankles, to our calves, to our feet, all of it.
Right. And then you mentioned the aerobic side. It is at the anaerobic side, which is kind of the counter. That's when we get past the point of being able to use oxygen and we start to get into other fueling mechanisms that the body can do, but can only do for short windows. The sports that we talk about here on this podcast are long distance races, 5K, 10K, half marathon primarily. And when it comes to those types of races, what are we relying on? The vast majority of the time is the aerobic system. And yes, there can be anaerobic components at the very end of those races, particularly the 5K, but you're not going to make it 26.2 miles on an anaerobic system. You're going to make it on the aerobic system. And, this is an oversimplification, but when you start to hurt in a workout, when you're, quote, going to the well, that's when you're tapping into the anaerobic.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working efficiently, using that same word again, that's when the aerobic system is doing its thing. And so I think particularly American culture, there's this misnomer that if it doesn't hurt, it's not helping.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's to actually optimize your running fitness. It's kind of the opposite. If it hurts, then you're actually hurting the process. You want to get to that place where you're as efficient as possible at running in that aerobic zone, which means that you're smooth, you're efficient, you can hold it for a long time, kind of, again, tapping into that endurance term. And honestly, that's a lot of what I tapped into on Sunday. Again, you can't divorce that result from my history because one thing I have history at is getting to those paces and being efficient. at them. And so the body recognizes that. It's actually developed all those mechanisms inside of me to get to those paces and be efficient before.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was able to wake them up and tap into them with, 12 good weeks of consistent easy volume with a little bit of strides and some strength work to make sure the legs could go. But all of that was coming from years, decades of doing this for a long time that was just kind of waking up in me on the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing it back to you guys, it's a matter of thinking about how can I most efficiently develop, use, and practice firing the aerobic system in a way that's going to allow you to carry the distance.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do the work to get there. And as we said, how you get there through the easy volume.
Yep.
Not through the fast stuff. And yes, there's a time for speed, but mostly it's about the easy volume and then a little bit of speed, as we've talked about before. And so this gets to this kind of principle, and we talk about it in a few different analogies. There's the analogy that we use sometimes where we talk about having a base or a big foundation to a pyramid, and the bigger your base, the higher the peak can go. And so you want to make sure you have a big base of volume so that you can get to a higher peak on race day. Another analogy that we like to use is sort of the car analogy, where you want to build the biggest engine you can. And if you have a big engine, then we can fine tune that engine to get the most speed out of it. Pick your analogy. It's all sort of the same concept. You've got to have that big foundation or the big engine in order to get the most out of what you want to do. And it starts there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting. You said earlier, it's the amount of miles that you can recover from. And it's like that time needed to recover. It's like it's reemphasizing that it does take time, but two, it's like, if you're going, I brought up the idea of stacked systems because if you look at the body through like a biochemical perspective, it's like if you're constantly going acidic, like how are you supposed to grow? Like if people just think of the word acid, it's like if your body is just acidic all the time, then you're interrupting that little time in there to quote recover and actually have a healthy thing grow. And when you said pick your analogy, it's funny because my brain was thinking of like, I don't know why, but this came to mind, but like those guys that will do art with chainsaws out of big blocks of wood and they can carve out a bear and everything, but you need the big block of wood first. And I've seen ice sculptors do it as well. But I think even writers know this, like someone writing a book knows that like their final book, like if they wrote a 250-page book, I promise that's not the only amount of words that they wrote. They probably wrote out about 500 to 1,000 pages. If it's a comedian, they're going to tour multiple cities, and they're going to get rid of so many jokes. If it's a musician, there are so many songs that got discarded. It's like you need something to work with. You need your block to work with before you can sculpt it and whittle it down. And I wanted to reach for some of those analogies because I'm like, because this one's so, I don't know that it's counterintuitive, but it's the one people just push back on it. They like, we get tempted to get out there and find the new sexy speed workout or the new silver bullet, but we've just seen it time and time again. That's why I think we originally started with quoting Lydiard and putting his name out there and making sure people understand the Lydiard philosophy, because it's like going all the way back to Lydiard. It's just like the miles absolutely matter. It develops this big engine or it builds that big block of wood, and then you can go whittle down.
Yeah, because if you have no engine or a small engine, if you have no block of wood, if you have no base of your pyramid, then you've got nothing to show for it ultimately. And a lot of people jump straight to the work. They go straight to the speed. And they're fine-tuning something, and you have some foundation from whatever movement you've done in your life. So you're going to see an initial short-term results from that. But then you're going to plateau really quickly and perhaps get injured along the way because you're doing too much, too fast, too soon. And you're certainly not going to be able to tap into the full potential. So you got to build the engine first, lay the base first, get the block of wood first, so that you can then sculpt the result or build the result that you want. And you have to do it in a certain order, unfortunately. And most people want to jump straight to the sexy speed stuff.
Yeah.
But it starts, whether you're building from scratch or rebuilding, it starts with easy volume.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a little bit of a hierarchy of kind of the order of how you do that. And again, depending on where you are exactly in your journey, this isn't necessarily a clean, perfect sequence, but the framework is right, which is that, and we have different ways of saying it, but you like the FVI acronym. You got to start with frequency, build volume or distance on those days, and then you add intensity or speed third. I like to say you build days, distance, then speed or quality. So pick your words, pick your acronym. But FVI is the one we'll use for today. Frequency, volume, intensity. That's probably the better way of saying it. But what do you mean by that? Build frequency first. Add days to your routine.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're able to add plenty of days to your routine, then you have no business adding distance to those days. And again, some people make the mistake of going out too long or too fast on the one day, and then they're really sore the next day, so they skip 3 or 4 days, and then they go to the next, instead of just taking bite-sized chunks that they know they can manage at slow intensities, establishing that routine first, days and frequency first. And by the way, this is true whether you're building or rebuilding. Somebody coming back from an injury, coming back from being sick, somebody coming back from a gap in training. This same construct applies, and it might just vary how quickly you're able to do it if you have a history. Frequency first, then volume. So then you start adding distance to those days once you've established that routine, and then you add intensity, meaning then you add speed once you get to a certain point. And I have a whole episode on this previously where we talk about building or rebuilding, and one of the things I say in there, which I think people found a little bit controversial, is I don't want you thinking about adding formal speed work until you get to a point where you can do a long run of 10 miles. And people are like, whoa, that's a long way. And it is for people that are just starting. But I think it's actually a valid point. You're actually only going to short circuit your ability to be healthy in the volume building game if you add speed too soon. So that was, it's a little bit arbitrary, but that was the rule I established in that episode, and I still stand by that today. Again, I think that's a little bit different perhaps if you have some history, but I think for those that are new in building, it's pretty good rule of thumb. And with the only caveat being, of course, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, is strides, which is not a formal workout, but it's a speed development tool. That gets added early on. But that's the only, quote, intensity we would want you to have until you got that long run to a certain point. So I'll pause there. FVI. What do you think?
I like them because the F is like, honestly, it's not only is it scientific and it's foundational, but it also is something easy for people to understand pragmatically, because it's the habit building argument. It's not just an argument. It's so well backed. Like, you can buy Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, Power of Habits. Can't remember. That was the first one, and it was life-changing for me. First one I read. But then also James Clear was even recently on Huberman, and I started listening to it again just to reinforce. I want it top of mind. So you had brought up like someone first starting out and also someone coming back. And I'm like, those coming back, I want them to hear the reinforcement more than anyone, because sometimes having old numbers in your head makes it easy to kind of overshoot the mark when we first come back in. And so being reminded that, wait, yeah, I used to run 60-mile weeks. I don't just start at 60. I'm going to kind of ramp up. What do I need to build first? My frequency, like get out the door. And James Clear does such a great job of explaining this, where he talks about how, like, I was trying to one time say it through words like precursors to precursors, but that whole frequency, like, sometimes it's not necessarily someone's desire or willingness or even, quote, discipline once they're working out to get things done, but it's sort of like, oh, shoot, I decided I was going to run this race and I've got this new commitment, and now running takes a certain amount of time, and you've got to like reorganize your whole weekly structure and like make sure that you have good foundational habits where, you know, you're just getting back in the groove of setting out your shoes, having your socks, making sure things are ready to go so that you don't like drive somewhere and you're like, I forgot my running shoes or I forgot X, Y, or Z. It's like it's such a pragmatic and practical tool where it's just like, okay, this week, whether it's big volume or not, I'm just going to get out the door regularly. I'm going to get out the door 5 times. And then I start to see those. I don't know why I always get visuals, and it's always nature visuals, but it's like I always see like lily pads floating in the water. And I'm like, all right, if we've got 5 to work with, great. I like a minimum of 4 because we live in 7-day cycles. And so again, because we're adaptive creatures, I think the human body is so amazing. We really can get it to do so many amazing things. Yes, it takes work and consistency and all of that, but we can literally develop skill sets. It's unbelievable how our body will change on the cellular level. But that 4 out of 7, because we live in 7-day cycles, that communicates to our body, we do this far more often than we do not. And so that's a signal to every system in your body that, okay, we need to adapt for this. We need to change. And your body will. You'll even find that like energy regulation throughout the day will change as you become a runner. Or if you're returning, you know, like you'll feel kind of like a spike of adrenaline, or it's not just adrenaline, but it's just all kinds of endorphins after a run. And then your body will smooth that out through the day and you literally reset. And so it's like, I'm just trying to drive home the importance of that frequency because it's rooted in just habit building. And then when you have the habit where literally you wake up and like you have almost like that instinctive twitch to like, oh, I'm supposed to go run now. That's when you can start saying, okay, now I want to increase that volume. And so you move into other principles that are both in the book and through multiple podcasts that you've given. And that's like, you can pick which day is going to be the MLR and you add that 1 mile to it. Or for some people, maybe it's half a mile or 5 minutes, 10 minutes. There's so many ways by which to grow volume or duration, i.e. just pushing up the amount of time on your feet. But at first, you want to know that you have that habit locked away and secured, because it's kind of sad when someone gets really motivated and they have 2 brilliant weeks and then they don't show up again. So it's like, there's a part of me that wants to anchor on the F and just hold tight to it and be like, do you have that? Do you have that? Do you have that? Do you have that? Because once you know that you know that you know that you have it, then it's like, cool, let's build up that volume, which is the miles matter. And then later we tuck in, and you've already covered it, but to finish it off, the intensity.
Yeah, 4 days is great. I do think that's a minimum. You know, we like 5 or 6 for those that are training for half marathons and marathons. And so get to that baseline foundation in the smallest increments that you can manage at easy efforts, which we'll also talk about here in a second. And then you start to add distance.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself 1 day a week where you're doing strides at the end of one of those runs. And then don't worry about any other speed work until you get to a 10-mile long run. If you've got that formula in mind with a long-term perspective, then you're doing well.
Mm-hmm. You know, real quick, I just wanted to say one reason why I like frequency is that we also do have 7-day-a-week runners. Sorry. But also there are some advanced athletes that are doing doubles. And so it does open up, it's semantics, but it opens up a little bit of space on the communication where there could be someone who does 8 to 10 runs a week. We're not out here promoting get to 8 to 10. That's not the spirit of this statement, but it does. There are athletes who, just to get their mileage, do sometimes have doubles worked in. And so that F opens up a little bit of space to, quote, create a higher frequency through the week.
More frequency.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But then that leads to the conversation about, okay, well, what about the progression? What does that look like as I get established with frequency? And I'm starting to look at total volume. And we talk about, as a general rule of thumb, and again, there's rules of thumb that we'll talk about throughout the book as well as the podcast, which are there for a reason to give you guidelines, but aren't necessarily the end all and be all. But 2 of them that we talk about as it relates to volume building, one is that you don't ever want to build by more than about 10% a week, which is a fairly common rule of thumb. I actually like to translate that into hard numbers for most people so that you're not necessarily thinking, well, 10% of this week versus 10% of next week. What am I, 10% of what? You know, it's like, no, let's look at it as when you're starting out, maybe don't do more than 2 or 3 miles per week more. And then as you get further along in the journey, then you can think 3 to 4 is a generally good bump from week to week. So you don't want to build by more than about 10% a week. And you can think of that in terms of miles or Ks or minutes. Kind of the general rules apply. And again, I like to translate it to hard numbers so that you can do the math easily. And then also from one cycle to the next, if you're starting out or if you're a veteran and you've already established a certain baseline, I tell people, I don't want you to build by more than 20% from a total peak mileage perspective from one cycle to the next. So if you got to 30 miles per week in one cycle of training, then you can peak out at 36-ish miles per week in the next big cycle. And then you kind of progress from there so that you're never taking that big a leap overall either. Because when we start to do that, and again, there's exceptions to the rule, but when we start to do that, then we risk injury. And we also aren't necessarily honoring the fact that this is a long-term journey. You know, you don't have to rush to any certain volume level. And in fact, you know, we would rather you err on the conservative side or make conservative choices at every possible step so that you can do it in a way that you can do it sustainably. So those are a couple of rules of thumb as you are building. The other rule of thumb I already mentioned, getting to a 10-mile long run before we add intensity, meaning formal speed workouts, which we'll talk about on other episodes. But don't neglect frequency first, then volume, then intensity. Now, we've mentioned strides already. We categorize that under this concept of speed development because there used to be a mentality with quote unquote base building where you just did easy miles and you didn't do anything else. And what we've learned, and this is really an adaptation through the years, certainly starting with Lydiard, because he would have people do hill bounding and things like that. But you want to prepare the body so that it is ready for the intensity when it comes. And easy volume is the foundational part of that. But then you do need a little bit of quote speed development so that when we do start going faster, the neuromuscular system doesn't just shut down on you. And I think it's part of the reason why my body didn't shut down this weekend is that I wasn't maybe doing formal speed workouts to prepare for this weekend, but I was doing strides. So I was getting little stimuluses where the body's, or stimuli where the body's like, okay, we understand there's some speed in you. We're firing the synapses. We're making sure the nerves know how to communicate with the muscles and the muscles know what to do when faster things happen. And they were ready. So speed development in this volume building process is still important.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to, this works as a way to understand it. It's not comprehensive and it's not perfect, but I used to just tell athletes like, hey, while we're building all of this volume, we're going to do these strides because what strides do is they look at those fast twitch fibers and they tell them, hey, I'm not really working you right now, but I do not want you to go away, kind of hitting on that like use it or lose it principle. And so it's, yeah, activating them, turning them on. And they're only like 20-second bursts, or they should be around 20 seconds. Sometimes we'll say 80 to 100 meters or around 20 seconds. But either way, it's just like these are very short bursts. And I like a long walk back recovery. And so because I brought up fast twitch fibers, I should say that your body has really kind of three. You have slow twitch fibers, which is the majority of what you're going to use in your marathon, half marathon, but you also have fast twitch fibers, and then you have some intermediate fibers in there as well. But it's really just easier to think of them as like, I've got my slow twitch, I've got my fast twitch, and don't let that be confusing either, because a guy like Kipchoge, who runs under 5-minute miles for an entire marathon, is a slow twitch guy. Like I had to remind myself of that. Like he's just loaded with slow twitch fibers that are going to last all 26 miles. But those that neuromuscular end where you're recruiting the fastest end of the range, strides turn all that on, and it's powerful. Like Dr. Andy Galpin, who's a guy I follow and look up to and really respect, he recommends to people what he calls Galpin snacks, and it's honestly 4 by 20 seconds hard once per week, and emphasizes the benefit of that. And he can apply that to a lot of different forms of exercise. We could keep it simple here though, because we're distance runners, and it's like strides not only check your box of like Galpin snacks, 4 by 20 seconds hard once per week, but it's also very specific to the sport that we do, and that's keeping those fast twitch fibers alive. And the reason why I said it's not comprehensive, because it's not just keeping them alive. You're actually like stimulating them and they're growing, and it's like you're getting more than just what I'm saying, but I think it's a good way to think about it. Like, we as working professionals, are used to saying priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. And it's like when you're like, priority 1 is my frequency, and then I'm stacking on volume now and I'm growing, these strides can be tucked in. It's like they're important, they're a priority. That's why we use that word. But it's like priority 3. It's like get your ducks in a row and in the proper order, and make sure you take care of first things first. But strides are low risk of any kind of damage. They improve form. There's all kinds of benefits that you get from them. And I actually think of strides as fun. With my one-on-one athletes, I'll often try to get them to think, so many people are dog lovers these days. I'm like, picture a dog doing zoomies around the house. Like that, your strides are that moment to feel like, man, I was out there in that slog of an easy jog, just trying to keep my heart rate low. At times it gets boring. I don't want to use that word too much because you can have a lot of fun with this once you get used to it. But after an effort like that, when you want that kind of feeling of satisfaction, you get your 4 or 5 strides in, starts to make you feel like a dog who just did zoomies.
That is the most common term I hear about strides, because it is that kind of ability to let it loose and enjoy it. Strides are short, controlled sprints. From a practical standpoint, how we like them executed, you can think of it as 20 seconds. You can think of it as 80 to 100 meters of work. Basically, the straightaway on a track would be the distance you'd want to be doing them in. And it's a build for about a third, where you're building your speed for a third, you're holding your speed for a third, and then you're letting off the gas and kind of cruising over the final third to a stop, not braking, but just cruising the final third. And in the middle, you're getting to somewhere around 85-90% of peak speed. And then you walk back for full recovery and repeat. So it's never an aerobic challenge because it's short and easy, and then you get that full recovery and then you go again. Strides are important whether you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced runner. We like them done once a week, small doses, only 4 to 6 of them at a time. And if you do that over time, they not only make you faster, keep those fast twitch muscles activated, but they also make you more efficient at that neuromuscular firing, so that you can be more efficient at other paces as well for longer periods of time. And so the analogy I like for strides is I like to call them allergy shots for speed. Because if you do one session of strides, it doesn't do anything. But if you do them not just weeks, but once a week for months and years at a time, then it makes just subtle changes to your form efficiency and empowers your speed in a way that will pay off because of that accumulative effect down the road. But you just got to do them. Take your medicine and do them once a week. So that is an underpinning of all of this. It's an important part of it. You can't just do the easy volume, but you need that. And by the way, Dr. Alan Cousins calls these alactic
what does that mean?
So A meaning without lactic. Okay. So I don't know if that's a made up term or his term, but he talks about this is an alactic stimulus, meaning without lactic. So it's not intended to be anaerobically challenging at all. It's intended to just be a neuromuscular stimulus, essentially. And so you want to make sure you keep it at that. So that's an important underpinning of all of this. As we kind of wrap the episode, I think there's kind of 2 important components, to kind of practical components to keep in mind as we close out the episode, more practical parts of this equation. One that people ask, well, what happens if I miss a day? Because it's so often that someone will get into the routine of building miles, get into the routine of a program, they miss a day, they beat themselves up over that, and then they think, well, all is lost. And then then that snowballs into a bunch of missed days. And we're here to tell you that it's okay. Miss your day, pick it up the next day. Don't make it up. Just pick up your plan the next day and carry forward from there. We have to remind people often that no one run or workout matters in the grand scheme of things. It's the body of work that matters. And does that mean you want to miss a bunch of runs and that doesn't matter? No, it just means that if you miss one run and you're doing 95% of them, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah, the biggest thing is shake it off, move forward, ask yourself, what's the go forward strategy? Because sometimes when people get in that I want to make up mindset, I don't like the makeup mindset. Rather, I mean, if that eats at you and you're thinking like you've got some pent up frustration, sometimes that might motivate folks and stuff. But I would actually take that motivation and just, I don't want to turn this into a long conceptual exercise, but I would just encourage people to spend about 5, maybe even 10 minutes thinking about, well, why did I miss it? And then be honest and real. This is back to that establishing the frequency so you can get all your habits and your ducks in a row so you can have that sort of dependable schedule, like you know exactly what you're doing and exactly what you need. It's like, you know, if it's a day where you're just run over, stressed, you're responding to your kids, you're responding to a fire at work, etc., then you know, okay, that's abnormal. That's not going to happen very much. I'm going to go get my next run. Things are going to be fine because that was more the exception as opposed to the rule. But if you start to identify, it's like, no, it's kind of on me. I felt a little resistance in the morning, so I pushed it and I was like, I promised myself I'll get it at lunch. But then you got invited to lunch and then you just kind of kick that can. Well, that's a different issue. And you want to have an honest conversation with yourself about like, okay, I missed a day. You're still just going to go past it, go forward. What's your go forward strategy? But I'm just encouraging that little bit of thoughtfulness, because if it is a matter of the way by which you manage yourself, then you can set in simple tasks. Like you schedule a run with someone else, or you meet up with them, or you lay out all your gear. I don't want to get into all the practicals, but there's tons of small little practical tools and tips. I just wanted to make sure that people don't get stuck in that quote makeup mindset. Rather, they say, okay, one day that's not what's going to make me. How do I go forward in the healthiest manner possible?
Right. Yeah. And the other part is, you know, as you said, it's going to happen, right? Don't beat yourself up. In the case of being sick, being too stressed, or something pops up that's pulling on your time and energy that is taking away from running. Oftentimes I like to tell people, hey, pat yourself on the back if you miss the day, because sometimes you need to give yourself that grace.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, especially if you're sick or something like that, you need to miss the day so that your body doesn't dig a deeper hole. And so the most important element, regardless of whether you had a good reason or not, is don't beat yourself up over it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, look at it, evaluate it, take any lessons forward, but then move it on and don't make up, just get on the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And carry forward from there. And again, if you can get 95% of the work, you're going to be just fine. And that's really what you want to look at. And that's also where, you know, I like numbers. We've talked about it, you know, annual volume numbers becomes to me something that really starts to measure that overall consistency. And if you can build annual volume or even monthly volume, then you can start to see, all right, is my trajectory in the right direction? Because that averages out those days where you might just miss, and that's okay. But yeah, miss, no big deal. Pick up the next one and get going. Last point we got to make here, really emphasize it. I think it's important that's the last point, is that in order for the frequency to work, the volume to work, and then ultimately the intensity to work, is you need to be running at a pace that is not only sustainable, but also make sure that you're hitting the right parts of the aerobic system in order to develop it in the right way, which means you got to slow down most of the time in order to make it all fit together. So what does that mean? We have rules of thumb here as well. You know, for us, when it comes to an easy day, an easy, just normal, easy long run, medium long run type of day, you should be running at least a minute to 2 minutes slower than your target marathon pace, or a minute and a half to 2.5 minutes slower than your target half marathon pace. If you're doing a recovery day, meaning the day after a long run or a speed workout, when you add those, then we want you to be at least 2 minutes to 3 minutes slower than your target marathon pace, or slower, and 2.5 to 3.5 minutes slower than your target half marathon pace, in order, again, to be in the right aerobics zone to build aerobic capacity in the way that you need to make it all fit together to get that foundation, but also so that you can do it in a way that makes it more sustainable, so that the body can recover from that work, so that you can do more volume. And if you're not doing those things, then none of it works.
Yeah. That's where maybe I can connect some dots from what we brought up earlier too, when we were talking about the aerobic system. We have aerobic, and I try to think of that. That's when we're going slow and easy and we're relaxed and there's plenty of oxygen coming in. And from a biochemical perspective, we're not throwing acid on our little plant we're trying to grow. And so it's like when we're in that easy zone, I like to tell athletes, think about that as creation. I'm creating. I'm growing. I'm creating ATP. I'm building up all the mitochondria. I'm increasing my capillary beds, which are, think of those as like a coffee straw as opposed to a regular straw, where they're just thin and they slow the blood flow down. And so then your cells muscles can grab oxygen and other nutrients. And so it's like all of that creation's occurring as you, and I'm glad you brought up lactate. It took me a second to piece the term together, and you also explained it. But yeah, that first inflection point, and we'll talk about this later in the book, is that's when we start to create a little bit of an acidic byproduct. It's not so bad, generally speaking, because we release lactate, which buffers that. And what's cool is our body can recycle. But now you're recycling. So think about that word creation. It's like if I'm here to grow and I'm here to build volume so that I build my engine, well, I'm no longer, quote, in my growth phase. I've slipped into now the recycling phase. And of course, when we go to anaerobic, that's kind of like maxing out. It's like we're just like we're well beyond recycling and creation.
We're destroying at that
Exactly.
point. Yeah.
And so I like those words because then we can simplify the conversation and say, what are we doing today? Are we growing or are we recycling? You're going to get caught up in the recycle game because you're going to get that same result. You want to be that person that literally is just like every marathon's within 30 seconds to 1 minute. And you're like, I worked so hard for 4.5 months. And it's like, well, this is one thing to consider. Like, are you going easy enough at the appropriate times? Because like we said, speed work matters at the appropriate time. But for these easy runs, in order to build, in order to be in that creation mode, you don't just want to be going easy. When in doubt, go easier. Like lean back in the name of, quote, I want to create. And that's where Laura's story is really amazing. You said, what'd y'all run? 6:30, 6:25 pace?
6:36, I
Or
think.
6:35 then.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and you said she spent most of her miles at 9 and 9.5. I see you post 10-minute miles regularly. Like
regularly.
you slow it down.
You got to slow it down. And the sooner you can embrace that concept that you really can't go too slow. And in fact, I want you to press the envelope on slow that you can stomach. And people will tell me all the time, oh, I can't go that slow. I promise you, you can if you practice it, if you commit to it. And what happens when you do that, not only does it unlock this ease of running, this enjoyment of running, but it also unlocks efficiency with your movement patterns that translates to efficiency at faster paces as well. To me, that's one of the unsung heroes of running easy. And there'll be people all the time that say, well, if I just go slow, then I'll get stuck going slow. And again, that's where strides come in to kind of disrupt that point. But it's just, that's a false argument that I want people to get away from. But commit to it. Commit to going certain slower paces on your easy runs and just see what that unlocks.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be surprised. You'll be pleasantly surprised. You'll end up with race results you never thought coming. But you gotta embrace that idea. Slow, easy, volume is the name of the game. Throw in 4 to 6 strides a week. You do just those two things and magic will happen.
Yep.
Obviously, we'll make it more complicated than that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So with that, let's wrap this one because, people are probably tired of us talking about miles. I'm not, because it is so foundational, but we will wrap this episode. As a reminder, you can get the book on our Instagram channels at Rogue Running. We have the links to buy it there, both the hard copy and paperback versions, if you want to follow along as we go through the content of it. Also, you can check out our website, roguerunning.com, if you want to train with us. This is now a great time, particularly to jump into any of our groups, whether in person in Austin or Dallas or virtually. We've got a program for you regardless of your starting point. And of course, tune into the YouTube version of these if you want to see our ugly mugs as we talk about these topics. But with that, we'll wrap it. As always, check us out at roguerunning.com and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Rogue Running. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.